Hello. This is working group serving meeting. Today is Wednesday, May 23rd, 22nd, 2024. Welcome everybody. We will start with our regular work stream summaries, and we have a couple more topics today. Very exciting. So first is Jackson.
Yes. So this Monday, we have the multi-host workstream discussion, and in that meeting, we discussed some challenges like management of the quorums, configurations, and the site membership as the crucial aspect to support like multi-node inference at the Kubernetes level, and also discuss some trade-offs between like some solutions like using a kubernetes or MPI operator versus the generic solution like leader worker set. I think we have some consensus on the Kubernetes components like that should have some flexibility to utilize any framework for distributed communication. And Abdullah also shows the leader worker sets capabilities to support Ray and MPI's distributed inference and share relevant documents and examples with us. I think we list a few like action items in the end. First is like we will ask the Ray community to share like how they work on their like solution and what's the benchmark numbers comparing to like the Kubernetes native solutions. And the second action item is community members will also review some leader worker sets proposals to check whether new like solutions, inference solutions like disaggregation can be supported in leader worker set in future. Yeah, so that's kind of the meeting summary.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Do you think we will have another meeting, or what will be the next step?
Yeah. To me, I feel at this moment, I think we can bring the users back to the weekly meeting and discuss some details here, because I think the first discussion we clarify a lot of like uncertainties and the multi-node use. I don't think multi-host have that many users compared to other like work streams, because this is only work for those large models or yeah. So that's consider the audience wise. I'm thinking it's worth to just bring back to the weekly meeting. So I'm trying to see any other one has different opinions like Clayton or Abdur.
I definitely think, given that LWS kind of already has some stuff going, we identified the key difference between the primitive approach to multi-host and the orchestration framework approach to multi-host. I think what my perspective was, I think it's really useful for us to talk about the orchestration framework approach, like the Ray, specifically like around Ray, where we kind of evaluate the trade-offs and maybe talk about the limitations of that. I know there was a thread on serving about this. So that seems like a reasonable next step for multi-host orchestration, since we've got LWS running. I think feedback to LWS, it might be good for you or other people who are doing multi-host inference to maybe we can do a more focused meeting on what are those specific leader worker set gaps, and if you want a primitive, what are the gaps that would prevent it from being useful? Might be two good next steps.
Yeah, sounds good. I think for those like gaps and comparisons, we can probably organize like separate meetings, and yeah, so that part I think I agree.
We have a hand. Kai?
Hi.
Hi.
I think we recently also have a lot of internal discussion about the worker set and the multi-host. And I think the main debate that for N-scale is that we doubt that is there any real use case for to deploy the model across multiple nodes. Because I think currently almost everything that's in the world that deploy it's in a single node. I think only like the some company that pre-train their model like OpenAI and like Anthropic may require the multiple node to deploy the model. Yeah, and so the first one is that from our perspective, we want to know do we actually observe the trend that required to deploy the model across multiple nodes? And I think the second one is that for the deployment paradigm, for example, like the specular decoding, like a prefill disaggregation. For example, like I think for a prefill disaggregation, I think for prefill and the decoding part, we may require a different auto-scaling requirement. So if we use something like a leader worker set, I think it may not be able to fulfill the requirement. And so I think like something like a specular decoding, I think in most cases that in the real world we deploy the draft model and the big model into a single GPU. So I think we still need to know more about like the deployment paradigm. I think at least that in the N scale and all of the related endpoint company that as we know, I think is follow this pattern. So at this moment, we don't see a very strong signal for the multi-host. And the last thing is like about the quantization. I think we may need more data about how many companies can use quantization. As I know, I think some company cannot use that because it requires some legal approval. But there are still a lot of companies that use the quantization. And do they use the int A or int fo? I think it is also important. If they use int fo, they can run I think Llama 3 that they have the largest model in the 400 billion parameters. But if we use the int fo, I think it's be able to run on a single H100. So there's no need for the multi node. So I think there are some points that we need to understand to discuss more about the multi-host.
I think those are actually good points too. I was going to say, I think multi-host is still pretty early. Like Google cares about it because the efficient TPUs are actually designed to work in a multi-host manner, right? Like TPUs and JAX are actually always designed to be multi-host so that they can scale. You never have to make a decision about scaling with TPUs. Like you can always just go to, you can go from 1 to, thousands for the same workload. Like that's part of the design goal. So we definitely, from a Google perspective, care very much about making sure that there's a community alignment. We do have a few people, who are getting into that multi-host inference, but I agree. Like, I think we have some time on the multi-host inference to talk through it. I don't think it's a super critical urgent. And I think maybe, as you say, like connecting the key users of the largest models, what their requirements in the open are. For instance, if people want to be able to run multi-host models across different clouds, that's a great reason to have an open component. That's something we've heard. But I agree, it's a relatively small class of users today. I think the next thought I have, and this is something that maybe we can, again, I think that it's useful to have a follow-up. We don't have to discuss it all here, but today the current generation is the biggest. The moment future generations come out, you're going to start having trade-offs between future generations and previous generations. And there will be incentives for people to create models that work on the largest Blackwell devices and run. And then that's really, I think, when multi-host inference is going to be relevant, because there will be models and people will want to run them on older cheaper accelerators, and I think that's where we're going to start to see it. So I think, yeah, it's a timing thing. It sounds like we have enough follow-up on this that we should probably have another session. We should maybe as a group figure out what topics we want to discuss.
Right. I have a few comments on questions asked on the speculative like decoding and preview disaggregation. So technically, I'm thinking that's kind of the orchestration problem. They have some overlap with the multi-host problem, but technically they can solve by assign like a preview and decoding different roles and solve the problem. So that means the preview and decode instance could be just one 8 GPU node, like one 8 GPU worker. And the auto scaling requirements, a lot of people like read the Microsoft splitwise paper, right? In that case, I think people saying, okay, well, what's the preview pool and what's the decoding pool? But technically, I think practically, I think that's hard to implement in real world scenarios. And even I think Microsoft, when they implement their first draft version in VLLM, they give up the flexible machine pools and use a static ratio instead. So I think, as I know, some practice, we use fixed ratio as well. So technically, that becomes still the orchestration problem, and every working instance focus on the single host at this moment. Yeah, that's some information I know. Yeah.
I want to second that. Like the fixed ratio is probably the one that is most feasible in the near term. And again, like even with LWS, even if you needed to do like two machines to do like, disaggregation, you can do that with LWS. It has this like, ability to define subgroups within a within a group. So that each subgroup you could say, okay, subgroup 1 is disaggregate is decode or prefill, and subgroup 2 is decode. We're working on this. We may have an example of this using Jetstream, like the Google inference server, in the near term, probably in next couple of quarters, to prove the concept. But I'm wondering if anybody knows if like the VLLM support for disaggregation has merged and matured and is being used. Yashin, do you folks use that, or did you implement your own?
We have our in-house. We have our own solutions. The VLLM, we have some customers that like to use the open source solution, so we leave an eye there. But as I talk with the folks who work on those features, they think that's the less mature, and they work with the serve authors, which there's other paper from the OSDI 24. They're working on that version. The splitwise version has been abandoned.
Okay.
That's something I know.
Can you please link the paper from OSDI in the notes? That'd be great.
Yeah. This the server. I'll send a link there. I'll attach a link in the document.
Thanks.
Okay, we have two more hands. Clayton, is your hand stale?
It is indeed stale.
Okay, Eduardo?
Yeah, sadly, there's no person that I would like to be in this meeting. There is Sanjay from NVIDIA. But internally at NVIDIA, we have been discussing about how multi-host, deploying multi-host models is still a bit complicated for the network topology conversation, right? These days, unless you use the cloud API, right, like AWS, Google, Azure APIs, when you're creating the instances, and you kind of request those instances to be together on the same switch or things like that, there is still no Kubernetes native way of requesting a network topology, right? So if you, when you are creating the cluster, you don't make sure that your nodes have a network topology that is going to be good for multi-host, then when you're already on top of Kubernetes, it's a bit hard to define that, right? So like I feel that could be also a topic of conversation on how can we, not from like each cloud vendor, but from Kubernetes, how can we make sure, or not make sure, but at least have a better way of having the picture of the network topology. I know I like that we have here Francesco Romani. I have worked with people on the node feature discovery project for topology, but at the node level, right? Like for NUMA awareness. But at the network level, still I haven't seen something like good enough to say that we can do topology aware scheduling in Kubernetes.
Okay, so that is one of the use cases that is filed against DRA at this point. So I assume Sanjay is involved or has seen that, but like just to make sure that we make the connection, that is absolutely on our radar. And we consider that it's not part of 131, but we would consider it like a extremely strong requirement for 132. So Antonio and Tim and John are all aware of that from our side. So we should just make sure that we, like, just to make sure we close the loop, we as a serving group should make sure that we vet the use case we give to the device management group that says, we want to make sure that this gets there and make sure all the people who are interested are participating together. Because I think as soon as we get past this hurdle on DRA, the next one is we want to see that scheduling of network topology. Like it's not even we have to have it. And so if we don't have it, we have to do it ourselves. We would prefer it to be an open standard, which is why John and Tim are so focused on it.
Yeah, I'll just chime in there. So I mean, I actually don't see that in the requirements doc last I looked. I mean, the concrete use cases. So I would love for this group to jump in there and add that. It's not in 131, although Antonio and I talked about different ideas. I mean, there's some ways to do simple topologies, but we need to really deeply understand what those topologies are. And but right now we're looking at primarily how do we land a particular pod on a particular node and get the devices set up there, so that choice of which node may relate to network topology of the node or of the specific network interfaces on the node or whatever it may be. So we have to understand how this group and the APIs created by this group need to specify to the down level DRA APIs those allocations. Because my point is, we don't have a view across multiple pods, but if you say had a tag associated with a particular topology, you could tell us constrained to this tag. But that may not be sufficient for what you need to do. So that's why I really, really need those use cases, and we need to understand how we can build the APIs you need for your components with a broader multi-pod, multi-host view to be able to orchestrate this on top of us.
So maybe then my ask would be, so along those lines, Eduardo, make sure that there's the person who cares from NVIDIA, and then we connect that on the multi-host orchestration group, because the folks on the multi-host orchestration group will be the ones who care primarily. That's where the use case is owned. So that's Abdullah and Shajin and any others who have that need. Why don't we try to get that use case in before next week in at least one or two? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I will connect Sanjay and myself with Abdullah for sure.
Okay, Terry, you still have a hand.
Yeah, I just raised my hand. I'll see if I can send someone from Red Hat too, because I know one of our teams has also experimented multi-host use case, and the major pushback is that the cost of the network latencies between the nodes are much higher than just increasing the accelerators or hardware accelerators. So that's the main feedback we have.
Okay, I think we spent enough time on this topic. Should we go to the next one? Auto scaling. Who want to speak about auto scaling?
Hey, I can give a bit of an update here. So last week we spent some time brainstorming warm replica or warm replica pooling, and we spent some time discussing what signals feed the various autoscalers in a cluster, and essentially try to categorize them so that we can find where there are gaps and where there are opportunities to do this like warm pooling. So we should probably continue that. Hopefully maybe this week if we can schedule something, and then discuss like maybe what we can do about it in 1.3.1 or 1.3.2. So yeah, that's kind of our first topic. And then I saw in the early notes that we also wanted to discuss things like auto scaling on latencies, and kind of go through the whole flow. So like what adapters would allow you to do that, how to configure all of that. So I think that would be the next topic we'll tackle. So definitely, yeah, go ahead, Clayton.
On that one, Ray, like, would it be useful, that internal doc, would it be useful to share a variation of that with the group, you think?
Yeah, I think so. You know, talking about the use cases so that we can kind of work from use cases backwards, that would for sure be helpful.
All right, I'll sanitize and share that out with the serving group as a doc. It's basically just I tried to brainstorm. So Zhezhen, I know you and I have chatted about this, and I'm sure others will be interested. This was a kind of a top-down. If I were a customer trying to use auto scaling, how would I think about it? So it definitely might be useful for others to see kind of how I'm framing it and challenge it, and I'll try to get that out tomorrow.
Thank you. Any more questions about auto scaling? I can try to schedule something. Ray, I can help you to schedule.
Yeah, that would be amazing, Sergey. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, next item is me, DRA summary. So Clayton did filled up this specific use cases, very concrete, very down to earth, like what we want from DRA, and it's a lot of use cases, and primarily from perspective of end user who specifies like how model will be running and what it needs to run. And I think like John already looked at it. You see how many comments here. So I believe this is resulted into this email from Tim Hawkins saying that end user expressibility is, I don't know if you looked at it. So Tim Hawkins saying that for 131, it's really hard to cover everything, end user expressibility and the simple API, as well as like expressiveness of APIs that DRA will expose. That's why suggestion is to concentrate on like in 131, end user API will not be ideal. It will not be like very friendly, but the underlying API will be very expressive. This is my understanding of what will happen, and my understanding is that it's not much of a delta from what 130 has. But I'd be happy if John can speak about it.
Yeah, I mean we're still iterating, even though the time feels the pressure of time on our cap freeze coming up is quite soon, in my opinion. But so we're a few weeks behind where we probably should be. This week we hope to nail down the overall scope for 130. My goal anyway is to nail down like the overall scope. And you know, next week we'll kind of hopefully converge on the API. Right now we have a couple of different proposals for API, which are, you know, coming closer together sort of as time goes by, because they're sort of experimenting with different ideas. So that all hopefully will come into line for kept phrase. Basically, my thinking is that I have to check my notes here. I have it. There's a certain set of functionality, I'll just say it this way, that's incremental improvements on what we have in 130 that we expect to get in. I'll send out a note on maybe on the worker mailing list probably today with what I'm thinking. I've talked to Patrick about it. I don't know that he agrees, but we'll see. But basically incremental improvements, including the partitioning model. So that means make support management access model, which is something that NVIDIA really wants to see. Those are on the kind of the capacity side. On the claim side, the things like one of are likely to be pushed out to 132. Some of the other things are likely to be pushed out. And basically, but I think based on the feedback I heard is some sort of topological constraints is something we really need. So I'm hoping to get that in, but like I said, it's under discussion. I don't know if that's, and the API itself, like Tim was saying, is, hey, we can make this API a lot prettier and a lot nicer, but it's going to require a lot more time than we have for 131. So in 131, why don't we focus on making sure we have an expressible API, and then we can layer on top a more user-friendly API in the 132 timeframe.
Yep, makes sense. I also started this document just very recently, so it's fresh from off press. I started looking at device plugin failure modes some time ago, and I find many problematic experiences. And I know that many customers have these problematic spaces, so they come up with hacky ways to work around device plugin failure handling. So today, if you look at device plugin, it has all sorts of issues. Like for instance, when GPU, like a device is completely failing and it's marked as unhealthy forever, Kublet will do nothing about this for the pod. And if containers crashing, it will just go into crash loop back off and will never be offered to allocate to another GPU or do something like that. So that's a set of problems I listed here. And also suggesting some scenarios that we may consider to improve. I think what we can do is to consider those scenarios for 131 for device plugin, while still while learning from that and like applying the same for DRA. I think DRA will have the same exact problems. So scenarios I list here is from very basic to complicated. So very basic is at least show that the pod which has unhealthy device has this unhealthy device, maybe as a pod event or something like that. Next scenario is if pod is associated with a bunch of unhealthy devices, you may want to just evict this pod. We don't want to evict pod if only subset of devices unhealthy, because we don't know whether the pod is capable of handling them. So I think it's implementation details, but I think the key here is that we need to have a way to evict something that is not running on healthy devices, especially for inference where restart policy is always, so you basically get into crash loop back off no matter what. Then retriable admission, we have problems with more than just device plugins like topology manager, like CPU manager. They all have problems with admission. Like if admission fails, we stop caring about the pod and it basically goes into this unhealthy state. I think retriable admission will be a very useful feature. And lastly, unscheduled pods. So today, when we fail to admit something and maybe even retried and fail to admit, there is no way to unschedule pod. So this pod will stuck forever here on the node, and ability to unschedule it and try to schedule it to different node is something we discussed before, and I think it will be very useful and handy for inference scenarios for our working group.
Just to clarify on that one, Sergey, since you just went past it, there's no such concept, and that would violate like our ownership transfer. I mean, is there something wrong with just marking it failed, or is that what you mean by unschedule?
Yeah, one way or another, fail it. So scheduler can attempt to schedule a new one. Like right
Okay.
now, it's just stuck.
Well, and I mean, I think that's a long running problem in Cube. Not everyone deals with admission failures, which means when admission failures do happen, poorly written controllers and poorly written custom operators behave badly. But every Cube version up till now has always behaved like this. It's just most people never hit the problem. So this is one that either way, this one is important to, I think, some users that I've seen to see fixed. So it would be good to think about the implications of this, but yeah, the current model doesn't really allow unscheduling, so it would have to be a fail. And pods can fail for other reasons too. If you don't handle failed pods, you're broken.
I see a lot of hands. Jack was first.
Yeah, is it possible to scope in a behavior where the workload is entirely evicted, so essentially deleted, in the context of a multi-cluster scenario where you have a multi-cluster scheduler outside of all the clusters that's doing eventual consistency across the clusters? So a really clean signal to that multi-cluster scheduler to move the workload to another cluster would be the deletion of that workload entirely from the cluster it was originally scheduled onto. Has that been discussed? The behavior of
No, but
entirely deleting a workload?
Feel free to add a comment about it. And I think
Cool.
this document is intended to be just a high-level scenarios that we want to achieve, and like specific implementation details is something we will discuss in CAPS.
Yep, we'll do. Thanks.
I don't know the ordering. I think Francesco was next.
Hello. So very simple suggestion following up what Clayton mentioned. Maybe we can have we can have at least a well-known failed reason which will enable controller to behave in a more sensible way and say, okay, if you hit this failure reason, this well-known error, you know that, okay, depot the failed admission and nothing you can do beside try another roast or something along those lines. Maybe that could be a nice step.
Well, is that that's actually a really interesting one. So that's you failed, but you can't, like, that's almost like a indicating that it's not retryable. So that's interesting. We've discussed something like that in the past, but some errors are retryable, like eviction, and others aren't, like the device is permanently broken. So we had to think about that. But I definitely agree that's it. I think that construct, what's retryable and what's not, I think fits into kind of what you're saying here is like, or what Sergey was saying with the others is some things are retryable, some things are not. Do the controllers need to know that, or does the scheduler need to know that, or do we need a signal from the node to the scheduler, out of band or in band, that this machine is no longer suitable for the kind of thing that we just scheduled?
I will be happy to explore this concept because this is really a nice elaboration of what I was thinking. So thank you.
Sasha?
Yeah, so what I wanted to add is similar to what Francesca said, but just wanted to remind. So this discussion about report somehow failed on the node and we need to reschedule it somewhere or delete and create again by high-level controller is not only about the admission loop within kubelet. It might be something on the low-level runtime which specific error of this particular pod on this particular node. So it might be not device related, it might be just like misconfiguration of a runtime, it might be like something, and especially like in web VM-based runtimes, it might be some parameters which says this pod, even though from scheduler perspective is this node is faking, it's not runnable on this node, and we need to have that like bounce back mechanism.
Yep. So it speaks to device plugin or runtime needs to be able to tell even like some information about retryable status of this error. Yeah, it's a good point.
And
So-
I will say, like,
Yeah.
I was going to add just one more thing. It's like, we in Cube, we have things that are always retried and things that are never retried. And one of the challenges of being in the middle and having some things that could maybe be retried is that's just much more complex than just having two categories. So we should always think about which of the things that we can clearly put into never retry and always retry as we think about failures. Because like we have multiple types of failures at the node that are poorly handled today because it's not always clear whether like a CRI error is temporary or permanent, and we default to one or the other. Being able to write down a great principle for Cube as a whole with the kubelet and how it interacts with the rest of the system on the current policy of always retriable and never retriable, and then saying what the behavior should be, and then that would be a great framing. No one's actually done that to my knowledge in the last couple of years, and so like that'd be a great input from this kind of next step that Francesco, you and Sergey are talking about. Like, how do we articulate those two? That's super important, and I feel bad that we've never done it. And it showed up a lot, like as we were changing pod lifecycle to make fixes, we realized that there were places that were incorrectly assuming things were retriable and things that were incorrectly assuming things meant you could retry or not retry.
Ed?
There is actually some work which is done by Francesca. I don't know why Francesca didn't point it out. I just send a link to it, so it was at least looking that on the already like made.
Thank you, Ed. The
yeah.
reason is that I didn't have enough bandwidth to incorporate all the feedback, but thank you for raising.
But you did some job, so
Yeah.
people should look at it.
Absolutely, thank you for that.
Yep.
Okay,
and
thank you for
the
plug.
thing was already actually presented on the bunch of SIGs, like SIG scheduling and SIG node, at least to my knowledge, maybe on others as well, so people are aware of it.
Yeah, by no means I meant to steal the thunder from anybody. I was just listing scenarios that we want to address as part of this working group. This is a great point. I think first two kind of less controversial. That's why I put them first, and then retriable admission and scheduled pods. I know that it's not an easy problem, so maybe like in the order of implementable versus less possible to implement 131, I put it in this order. I want to give more time on other topics. If maybe spend 5 more minutes here. Ed, do you still have hand, or it's stale?
No, it's stale.
Yeah, my comment is actually to move to other topics. I feel that we spend too much time on this, given that we have a DRA working group. So I wonder for next time as well, do we really need to spend a lot of time on this topic in the working group serving versus doing it in the device management working group session?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I can bring it there as well. Anyway, yeah, that's this topic, and orchestration workstream, Terry.
Yeah, for this one, I think we are just looking for volunteers to help set up a meeting between Ray or RayServe team. So basically to have a similar discussion to what we had earlier with Kserve. So if anyone from the Ray team can help invite a few folks from the RayServe team, that would be great.
Yeah, I just replied those threads that's in the channel, and I think we can sync offline, and if there's any schedule time, I can just invite like a Ray 13, or do you want to also invite like a Ray Core, or yeah, I think I just want to know that who you want to invite. We have Ray 13, and we have the large language model team, and we also have other like our team, like a Ray Core about like auto scaling, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so
yeah, we can discuss offline.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Okay, Ashok, do you talk about standardization?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, so I shared this talk based on our initial discussion around how we can standardize on some of the metrics that we
model servers export, and how we can use these to make better auto scaling decision than just going by GPU utilization or some other metric that is supported by default, right? So I can give like a brief overview of what this talk covers in a couple of minutes. I think a lot of folks already looked at it and have given some good feedback. Then we can maybe discuss some of those too. Yeah, just to go over this, I've captured like what are like the commonly used metrics to measure performance that is usually reported in benchmarks and elsewhere. We want to make sure the model server reports these commonly used metrics. And below you can see I've picked like Hugging Face, TGI, VLLM, and Triton as the ones to see what they report today and what are some of the missing metrics there. So we want to support metrics that are missing from this table in the model servers that are missing. And if we go down to the custom metrics that we want to add, I've also included around like 10 metrics that we can add to these model servers, which will allow us to like take better auto scaling decisions and even load balancing decisions in the future, right? Because model servers do a lot of their queuing and some kind of orchestration at the model server level, which would be better for Kubernetes to do some orchestration itself, right? For example, if the model server keeps receiving all the requests and queuing it, it becomes hard to like effectively load balance and stuff. Similarly, with auto scaling, some of the custom metrics like how big the queue size is, how much the waiting time is before the request is even getting processed. All these things could allow us to make better auto scaling decision on. So these metrics kind of cover different aspects of it. So yeah, I'm looking for feedback on whether the metrics here make sense. And also I'm looking for anyone who is willing to contribute to these popular model servers, these metrics. Right, if anyone is already like working with VLLM, TGI, or on Triton side, yeah, it would be good to see how we can add these metrics there too. Yeah, that I can open for any questions and discussion around this.
Do you know, I mean, this document doesn't say which metrics are already implemented where. So maybe if you can add a little bit of information which are implemented already, it may motivate other people to implement it as well.
Yeah, so the already implemented metrics are the ones reported in the common metrics column. For example, the ones that are already marked are the ones that TGI, VLLM, and Triton support today. The missing boxes are not supported in the metrics in the model servers that it is missing in. And the custom metrics that we have called out here are, to my knowledge, not in any of the model servers, at least as metric. So would be good to add.
Yeah.
Anybody from TGI or VLLM on the call? I wonder. Okay, so I guess this is one next step. We could probably also open issues in VLLM and TGI repos and ask them to review this document. I'm assuming we have a lot of NVIDIA folks here on the call. I hope that they can comment on the Triton part as well. We can also open an issue on Triton repo and ask them to give feedback. And I'm wondering if there is anything else we're missing here. Like we're focused on TGI, VLLM, Triton. Are we missing another framework, another model server that we should consider here?
And I saw Stavros mentioned Olama and like Llama CPP. I think, you know, one of my thoughts here would be what I guess it would be awesome would be if people like the set of model servers will differ between everybody who's using it. You know, our focus in Ashok's writing of this was like the ones that we hear people talk about. And we might actually want to, as a group, kind of think about the model servers that are relevant and make a combined argument about which ones we should focus on. So that would be maybe another input as well, is if you don't see a model server here, providing a little bit of more info about why it's important and how you think about it, just so that we can, find common perspectives across groups.
Yeah,
Okay.
agree. And Stavros, like, yeah, if you can, yeah, in the comment mention like why you would like Olama here too. I think that would be good, and any other model server too. I see Kai has a question on if we have inter-token latency. Yeah, I think we have time per output token listed that too. All right, yeah, thank you.
Also, one ask too is if the terminology here doesn't match the terminology that you would use. I would love to see some of those comments in the doc. Some of these are how we think about it, but we always want to make sure that the terms that we think about and would use in Kubernetes are terms that everybody agrees with. So if you don't like the fact that we said admission or correctness or capacity, please add those comments as well.
So there are some other model servers that we may want to look into, like traditional ML. I don't know if that's something we want to focus on, like, or take into consideration. But for now, look by skimming through the doc, it looks like most of the model servers are for large models. Is that the focus?
Yeah, I think the initial set that we picked is based on like how much usage you are seeing for these model servers and things that are more commonly used in production, right? But ideally, as long as any model server that is being used widely, we want to have it there too. That way, it makes it easy to standardize on this, and when we publish auto scaling guides on how to do these things, it makes it easier.
And this is an LLM bias. I mean, let's be pretty clear. Like, this wouldn't necessarily apply for diffusion, and so I do think we should maybe clarify in the doc that that's the focus. And again, like others, if there's a reason that you would want similar metrics on diffusion, please make those suggestions. Or if there's an argument or prior art for other formats, I think the scope here was deliberately chosen to be what our focus is, but the working group is allowed to, it should certainly feel free to say, well, we should broaden the focus, or we think this is relevant outside. I think admission, latency, and throughput are pretty common. Cube never really had strong opinions about any of those, but almost every single person cares about those things in some form or another. A lot of traditional web applications do not have a queuing concept. That actually is bad if you get overloaded. And so like some of these like LLMs kind of represent an opportunity for us to look at them and say, in this very specific case, if we could standardize latency, throughput, capacity, admission definitions here and use them productively, I think there's an opportunity for working group serving to say, well, could we, as subsequent steps, are there ways to make that valuable for other workloads where various aspects of these are important? Not my primary goal, but like it certainly is in the back of my head to say, if we know what your latency and throughput are for a large class of workloads, most people are going to be better off.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Okay, let's go to the next item. Chong, how much time do you need?
Hey, thanks. Probably just a couple of minutes, depending on how this is a very early discussion. So yeah, this is Chong working at Google Cloud. So we at Google hear some early signals from customers that, rolling out, managing the lifecycle and rolling out models or model server binary updates is a pain point. And so we have done some investigation on some of the, frameworks, tools out there. And I'll be very happy to share some of those learnings either offline or next time. So today I want to bring up this topic. I skimmed through the meeting notes. This doesn't seem to have been discussed a lot, so I want to bring up this topic. So do your customers feel any pain points or any gaps in terms of safely and efficiently rolling out changes to your inference workloads? And I prepared some high-level questions to trigger the discussion. And yeah, depending on how I guess how interested people are in this, so we can either talk about it or just use this doc to communicate offline.
I think this is a great topic under orchestration work stream. I wonder, Jan, if maybe there is a follow-up here we want to make on, I don't know, like trying to explore what people are using out there. Like, are they still using Argo, for example? What do they do with Kserve? Like, does Kserve itself support these types of capabilities?
Yeah, Kserve does support some advanced rollout strategies, and there's also Argo rollouts. Yeah, I don't know. I need to take a look at the list of questions more closely.
Okay, so we will consider this part of orchestration work stream, and maybe next time come again, and maybe we'll spend more time on this. That sound good? Okay. Finally, I want to say that cap freeze is coming up in 131. So far, I tried to collect ideas, like what ideas were formulated on what you want to do in 131 in terms of caps. So far, I have auto-scaling like ideas, what can be improved in terms of pod bootstrap and not bootstrap improvements. I linked to the documents. There is specific bookmark there. I heard this one from orchestration is scale down specific pods out of daemon set, for instance. So like not daemon set, like deployment. So this is one I heard. I don't know if anybody from orchestration work stream can correct me if anything else were voiced as a cap that we can start working on in 131. Then we have TRI API. It's something that we planned for a while, and failure modes for device plugin that I shared earlier is another potential caps for 131. I think this one auto scaling, like typically, like all the caps listed there, most of them are node related. So I would need to go into node and see if you can fit any of them into schedule. Same as this one, also node related. If there is anything else you want to work on or you want SIGs to work on, please start conversation in Slack. I will try to list all the caps we already have in the pipeline, and maybe next time we'll have exact specific caps and maybe even PRs for those caps to discuss a specific implementation for 131. Any suggestions of other caps that needs to be listed?
Sergey, I'm curious about the OCA artifact one that was raised yesterday, and what this group thinks about that cap.
Yeah, I think it's listed here in the list of ideas. So you're talking about this container image volume mount type, right?
Yeah. But I think Sally came to Signode yesterday with new cap she's opening to basically tackle this issue.
Yeah, I was thinking to market this idea for 131 that will help us. And once we have it on the list, we can help with like reviews and promotion of a cap to move forward.
Can you link it in here, Mernal?
Yeah, sure. I'll add a link there. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other topics? If not, then we can adjourn right in time. Thank you, everybody. See you later. Bye.
Have a good day.